ponytail girl, grown up to be a woman. Now she's gone in a blink of an eye. She left the suds in a bucket and her clothes hanging out on the line.
So before we hop on, there's two things that are going to keep you sitting on the horse. First off is strength. The main thing that's going to keep you on the horse is strengthening your thighs, right? That's where you want to grip when you're riding bareback. And then the second thing is balance, right? If you're not balanced, if you kind of flop all over the place, you're going to really struggle to stay on the horse. So these are all things that you can start working on in the saddle before you move to bareback. And you can do this by doing lots of no stirrup work, just working on balance, walk, trot work, transition, stuff like that, to help start gaining both strength in your legs, your core, because that's also going to keep you upright, as well as your balance. Now that we've hopped on, we are going to go over the basics. First, where to sit. You don't want to sit back here. You also don't want to sit way up here. You basically want to sit right behind the withers, where you typically would as if you were in a saddle. You also don't want your legs super spread out. No starfishing. You want them relaxed to the horse's side. No slouching your back. You also don't want to lean back or lean too far forward. You want your back straight, your shoulders back, and you want to make sure that you're following the lines of symmetry. Start at the walk first. Work on maintaining your posture, asking the horse to turn, stop, back. All of these things that are important when you are riding a horse. You want to make sure that you're not super stiff, that you're not flopping around like a sack of potatoes, and that you start moving with the horse and in a fluid motion. Once you move on to the trot, continue focusing on your seat, your balance, your posture, and all of that. One common mistake riders tend to make when they're learning bareback is that they start bouncing around like a sack of potatoes. So imagine you have a $100 bill underneath your butt, and it is your goal to keep your butt on the horse so that $100 bill doesn't fly away, because if you bounce around too much, it could affect the horse. Now, some horses have a bumpier trot than others, so you can also learn to post the trot. Now, this takes a lot of practice, a lot of thigh muscle, and just a lot of work in general. But just remember that whether you're doing the posting trot or the sitting trot, it's important that you know how to do both. Filio was not a huge fan of the idea of cantering today, so while we did get some on video, it's a little bit choppy, so I apologize in advance. When it comes to the canter, you basically want to move your hips with the horse in one fluid motion. Imagine a circle, and you're moving your hips in that circle, and that is how you're going to learn to sit the canter. And again, you don't want to be flopping around like a sack of potatoes. You want your butt to remain on the horse at all times. Another big thing to remember with a canter is that sometimes the canter is smoother than the trot, right? So if you're struggling with the trot, if you're able to push that horse into a canter, you might notice that it's a whole hell of a lot easier to sit and have balance, as it's more of a fluid motion. It doesn't have as many beats to the gait as the trot does, but you'll get there. Next up, we have this wondrous thing called brakes. If your horse does not know how to stop, you should not be working on bareback, trotting, cantering, any of that stuff. You need to be working on brakes, because if your horse does not know how to stop, well, you're fucked. So with that being said, any good trained horse knows that as soon as you sit deep, which looks like this, as soon as you sit deep in your seat, that means to stop. You should be able to do this at the walk, trot, and canter. Filio is good at all three of them. The other thing you can also get to make bareback riding a little bit easier, because some horses, their spine is going to go, right up into your parts. So the other thing you can do is you can get a little bareback saddle kind of like this. So this is made by Bareback pads, and I really, really like it. First off, you have the option for stirrups, but I typically don't ride with stirrups, and I don't think it's smart in these things anyway. But the one thing I like about the Bareback pads as well is that they have a bunch of padding underneath. Like, these come out, so not only can you fit it to different horses, but it kind of helps distribute your weight a little bit. Moving on to the Bareback pad. As for your posture, it should remain the exact same as if you were in a saddle or fully bareback. You want your back straight, your shoulders back, following the lines of symmetry, all that fun stuff. As you begin to walk, just continue working on your posture, your balance, your seat communication, all that fun stuff, right? The biggest thing to remember is that all of the same rules still apply, right? When you're in a saddle and you have all of these ways of riding and all that stuff, it's all the exact same, except there's just a little bit less when you ride bareback. As for trotting, just like before, we have the sitting trot and the posting trot. Both of them are super important to learn, and another big thing with the posting trot is that it will help you continue to gain strength in your legs. As for the canter, yet again, we want to work on moving with the horse, not against the horse. We want it to be one smooth, fluid motion. So what are some reasons why we might want to ride bareback? First things first, it does help us develop better legs and seat. Secondly, we can feel the horse a lot more, right? We don't have a bunch of leather and all that stuff, kind of like restricting how much we can feel of the horse, so we can feel more of the slightest movements in the event they're getting a bit nervous, frustrated, stuff like that. Riding bareback is also a little bit more natural, right? Once we start getting into all of these super fancy saddles and, all this expensive equipment and stuff, right? None of that stuff is really natural for the horse. It's actually not natural for the horses to be ridden at all. And so riding bareback kind of brings back that natural part of it. The biggest thing is you have to remember that you got to find ways to distribute your weight evenly, which is one of the reasons why I like the pads, is because there's a lot of ways that you can make sure your weight is distributed across the back. Because if you're constantly riding in one spot on the back of the horse, it can start causing soundness issues later on in life. But anyway, so those are some basic reasons why you might want to learn to ride bareback. A few things to remember as you're learning to ride bareback is that if you're flopping around a lot in the saddle, if you're not very balanced, you really don't want to go bareback, right? You don't want to be doing that in the saddle at all. But once you go bareback, there's actually more risk of you hurting the horse from bouncing around, riding around like a sack of potatoes and stuff like that. So you want to make absolutely sure that you are at least somewhat balanced and you're not going to be bouncing around on their back all the time. Again, you want to get better at this in the saddle because you don't want to do that in the saddle either. But when it comes to bareback, it's also very important. Next up, be safe. If you feel like you're going to fall off at the trot, ask the horse to stop. If you feel super uncomfortable or nervous, ask the horse to stop, right? Because you're riding bareback, there's not a lot really holding you on the horse except for yourself. This is good because it kind of starts to teach you proper posture and how you're supposed to hang onto the horse, but safety is also priority because if you do fall off and something happens and you get hurt, we really don't want that happening. And finally, some of the best ways you can start learning bareback are, first off, just hop on bareback. It'll start helping you gain balance in your seat because you kind of figure out where you're not balanced, right? The next thing, start riding without stirrups when you're in your saddle. You can also have somebody lunge you, right? So let's say you're on the horse bareback and somebody's lunging you from the ground. That way you're not focusing on too much at once, right? Because if you're trying to steer the horse and hang on and all this stuff all at once, it's going to be a whole hell of a lot harder to learn. So having somebody lunge you, riding without stirrups, these are all ways that you can start to develop your muscle and your balance and all that stuff so you can learn to ride bareback and do it a lot better. So with that being said, I hope you guys all enjoyed this YouTube video. If you've not already, please hit the red subscribe button. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or podcast. Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Definitely check out our merch store as well. And all the links to all that can be found in the description. We'll also be adding the link to the Buck You bareback pads in the description as well. So you guys can go and check those out. Don't forget, we're also a sponsored rider for Jeweled and Tool Custom Leathers. They made this awesome halter for Faye, and if you want to use the discount code WILDCHILD2023 at the discount, or at the checkout, they will give you a 10% discount. So stay strong, stay true, stay wild, and we'll see y'all next time. He didn't want a kiss.